The night the Apache woman was dragged to the ranch, the moon hid behind torn clouds as if it did not want to. Witness what men were capable of doing to each other. And Neol, whose name meant wind, that refuses to kneel, bit down on her scream when the rope burned into her wrists and pulled her from the dirt she had sworn would one day hold her bones with honor. She had already lost too much to cry out for mercy. Mercy had abandoned her people years ago, riding away on horses with white men's flags and rifles, leaving behind scorched lodges, broken elders, and children who learned silence before laughter. The ranch loomed ahead like a black scar carved into the land, fences stretching like ribs, buildings squatting low and heavy, daring anyone to challenge their claim. Neol believed this place was no different from the others, another stronghold of cruelty, where men took what they wanted and buried the truth beneath dust and excuses. The hands that dragged her were rough, impatient but strangely restrained, and that confused her more than their strength. She expected laughter, cruelty, the kind of joy men found in breaking what they did not understand. Instead, there was only the sound of boots on gravel, the snort of horses uneasy with the night and the quiet, controlled breathing of the man holding the rope. When he finally stepped into the lantern light, she saw him clearly for the first time, tall, broad-shouldered, face carved by sun and regret, eyes sharp but tired, the kind of eyes that had seen death too many times to romanticize it. His name, she would later learn, was Caleb Hartman, a rancher feared by outlaws and distrusted by townsfolk, rumored to be ruthless, rumored to have blood on his land that never washed away. To Neol, he was simply another enemy wearing a different mask. She spat at his boots, whispering curses in her native tongue, promising the spirits would remember his name when the earth reclaimed him. He did not strike her. That alone unsettled her more than a blow ever could. Instead, he cut the rope at her wrists, slow and deliberate, and said only one sentence in a voice worn thin by responsibility. "You're not a prisoner here unless you make yourself one." Those words echoed in her skull long after he turned away, ordering the other men back to their duties, leaving her standing alone in the yard, free hands trembling, heart hammering as if it did not trust the space around her. She had been dragged here, yes, but nothing else followed the pattern she knew. Inside the main house, the air smelled of wood, coffee, and old paper, not rot or filth. A room was prepared for her with a bed, a basin of clean water, and food left untouched on the table as if he feared contaminating it with his presence. Suspicion coiled in her gut like a snake. Kindness, she knew, could be sharper than knives when it came with expectations. She refused the food at first, sitting in the corner all night, listening to the ranch breathe around her, the creak of beams, the distant call of cattle, the low murmur of men who spoke her name, like a problem they didn't know how to solve. By dawn, hunger gnawed at her pride, and she ate, hating herself for needing what this place provided. Days passed and no harm came. No hands reached for her. No orders demanded submission. Caleb spoke little, but when he did, he spoke plainly, explaining that the land she had been found on was under threat from men far worse than him. Men who would not hesitate to sell her, kill her, or use her as leverage. He said bringing her here was the only way to keep her alive, even if it meant she would hate him for it. She did hate him. She hated the calm in his voice, the way he watched the horizon as if expecting ghosts, the way his men followed him not out of fear, but trust. She hated that he treated her like a person when every instinct told her this was a lie waiting to spring. Yet cracks formed in her certainty. She saw him break up a fight among his workers without raising a fist. She watched him bury a ranch hand killed by rustlers, standing alone long after everyone else left, had pressed to his chest like a man begging forgiveness from the ground itself. At night, she dreamed of her mother's songs and woke with tears drying on her cheeks, furious that this place had not taken that from her too. Still, freedom remained an illusion. The fences were real, the world beyond them dangerous, and she knew running meant death. That knowledge tasted like ash. Caleb never pretended he was innocent. One evening, when the sky burned red and the land seemed to bleed light, he told her the truth. she had not asked for, that he had once been part of the violence that destroyed tribes like hers, that he had followed orders and called it duty, until the faces of the dead followed him into sleep. This ranch, he said, was built on stolen land, and every fence post was a reminder he could never fully escape what he had done. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not expect understanding. He simply said, "I'm trying to make sure the damage stops with me." The words struck. Diol harder than any whip. She had imagined monsters roaring with pride, not men who carried their sins like stones in their chest. Still, she refused to soften. Survival had taught her that hope was dangerous. Yet as days turned into weeks, and she remained unharmed, respected, allowed to walk the land under watch but not chains, something inside her shifted and uncomfortable. Awareness that the world was not as simple as enemy and victim, that sometimes people became terrible not because they were born so, but because they chose the wrong silence at the wrong time. She did not trust him, not yet, but she began to watch him, not as a captor but as a question, and questions she knew were the beginning of power. As Chapter 1 closes, remember this: not all stories reveal their truth at first glance, and sometimes the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we cling to for survival. If you want to know how hatred slowly turns into understanding, how pain collides with redemption, and what happens when an Apache woman and a haunted rancher are forced to face the past together, make sure you stay with this story, subscribe to the channel, and continue into Chapter 2, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about justice, captivity, and the price of becoming human again. Ezekiel Crow expected death when the shaman stepped into his room, not hope. The old man moved slowly, filling the air with the scent of sage and smoke, his eyes sharp and knowing, as if he could see every choice Ezekiel had ever made written on his bones. Through the native girl, now strong and calm, the shaman spoke of balance, of how the land remembers those who act with compassion. He said Ezekiel's sacrifice had awakened a debt older than medicine, older than fear. As the ritual began, pain surged through Ezekiel's chest like fire, then faded into a deep, peaceful warmth. When he woke, sunlight filled the room, and for the first time in weeks, he breathed without pain. Days passed and strength returned, slow but steady, leaving doctors and neighbors stunned. Ezekiel understood then that life given freely comes back transformed. He opened his land to those in need, lived his remaining years in service rather than regret, and when his final day eventually arrived, it came gently like the closing of a well-lived story. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of sacrifice, miracles, and humanity, because the next one may change the way you see life forever.